Hey you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get everything started just so we can plow through all of the information today. I'm gonna go ahead and record just because some people might show up late, and I know at least one of you wasn't able to make it today, so I wanted to make sure that everybody's able to get access to the information via the recording. Hi, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. You guys having a pretty good week so far? Are you guys fully and completely recognizing exactly how close to the finish line you are?
Is it 3 weeks and then finals or 2 weeks?
As of today, there are 3 weeks left, I think, including finals. Like, I think that includes finals week. So there's like 2 regular weeks and then finals week, which is absolutely absurd. And as far as this class goes, we've got two more speakers officially, and then obviously the finals week. You guys are going to be busy, doing finals, and so we aren't scheduling a speaker for that week. Yeah, I cannot believe how quickly spring has kind of gone by. It's simultaneously, we've gone through the semester at warp speed, but also it's been forever. We've been in this class forever. And I'm sure you probably feel that way about some of your other classes as well. I think that's just the nature of online learning. It takes a while and it takes a toll, but hopefully you guys are happy that you guys are reaching sort of the finish line. I think everybody who's logged in now was able to make it to today's lecture with Catherine Magel. What did you guys think?
It was really cool to see like this. I've like noticed those sculptures like in multiple places, and like I've definitely been like, oh, I wonder who makes those. It always happens with these talks. Like I recognize things, and I'm like, oh, this is so great. I also liked. I think the like large mural, like not well, they were murals, kind of, not like the big ceramic ones that went on like the levee walls and stuff. Those encompassed a lot of themes, which I thought was really interesting, and like a lot of research must have gone into that. So yeah. I like the research aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about monumental, monolithic pieces in the St. Louis art community. These are things that like potentially we have seen, especially those of you that have lived in St. Louis longer than I have. Walking around Webster, seeing the flood wall murals, like these are things that potentially you grew up with seeing. Not saying that they've been in place for that long, but they have been a pivotal part of the St. Louis area for a substantial amount of time. What else? What'd you guys like? This was sort of like, I think, one of the first times that we've had a speaker that, hold on, let me let Jade in here real quick. All right, welcome, Jade. This is one of the first times that I think we've had an artist that specifically works kind of with public art projects. I think for the most part, we're hearing from artists that work in like a gallery context or like a fine art context, and not necessarily this public art space, which, like Catherine said, is like can be very lucrative if you figure out how to navigate that situation. And I think I've said it, in terms of encouraging you guys to look at opportunities. You can apply for solo shows and all of that, but that doesn't necessarily get you a paycheck, right? So these public art opportunities, you don't have to have a fully fleshed out, project that already exists in the real world. They can simply be proposals. So it creates this space where you can think really bigger than you even think that you can handle, and then you just put it out into the universe. And if somebody else sort of sees your ideas and they also want those things to come to fruition, they're willing to pay the price that sort of helps you get to that point. So yeah, I think it's just kind of a refreshing, different take on a side of the art world that we don't often hear from, and one that potentially can be lucrative. Any other comments about Catherine's work?
It was surprising to hear sort of like how much money went into some of them, because there's like a couple 10,000, I think like one of them I remember was like 40,000 or 50,000. I was like, that's crazy. Like, I didn't think it would be that much. So is that like, does that cover materials, or is part of that like how she makes an earning?
So it's a little bit of both. You have to, and this is sort of what she was talking about, is that like when she first started applying and trying to chase after these opportunities, she didn't necessarily have the wherewithal to sort of factor in exactly how much a project would cost in terms of paying for materials, but also labor hours. And I think that's something that you learn sort of throughout your life as an artist, is that you learn that you need to actually budget in paying yourself for the labor that you're doing on a project. And this can also, we can take this from a public art scale, but you should also be factoring this in to how you price your own work, which I think is really, it's always a sticky situation when an artist is trying to figure out like how to price their work. But you should be valuing your time. Like your time is worth money. And whenever you're thinking about pricing your work, or whenever you're thinking about creating a budget for a large scale project like this, you need to make sure that you're creating a space where you are going to come away from it with some type of, honorarium or salary, and that all of the money isn't purely going into just materials. Because that's not a way to live, right? And I think it also, especially on large scale projects, you need to be aware that on a macro level scale, a project might take more than one person to complete. She's worked with various artisans and craftsmen throughout her career, and you have to factor in those fees as well. So if you're going to have help creating a large scale monumental piece, I would hope for the most part you are contracting paid help. And then you're factoring that into your budget as well. So Emily, that is probably why some of those projects are in like those higher figure numbers, is because she's not only trying to make sure that she comes out of it having made a profit, but that she also has budgeted in enough money to pay assistants. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are various, fabrication projects that will ask for volunteers. And free internship, where sort of the form of payment is through experience and through training. That can be a form of payment. But I think a lot of the time on these kind of monumental scale projects, they're working with contracted workers that are actually being compensated for their work and their time. And I simply say that just from experience. Like, I worked for a fabrication company where I was making large scale pieces for other artists, and I was an employee of that company. And so I was being paid an hourly rate. The owner of the company was being paid sort of a design fee. And then the artists that hired us to create the work, they had probably gotten a giant grant or a commission where they took out sort of their piece of the pie as well. So whenever you're pitching to do a project like this, you have to factor all of that in within like a macro level budget. Let's see, Liv says the meditating bunny was right outside my middle school, high school for years. It was crazy finally seeing the lady who made something that was very present in my younger years and has a lot of good memories attached to it. Oh, Liv, Hold on, I'm gonna screenshot that because I'm gonna send it to Catherine and she's gonna be so happy that you have good memories attached to one of her pieces, and that's just gonna warm her heart, and I'm gonna send that to her later. What else? Did we learn anything else from sort of this public art mogul of sorts?
I like she talked about contracts a lot, which I think even though she does like really big commissions for a bunch of money, I feel like that's a thing that I should probably implement into like my commissions that I do, because I've drawn stuff for people and they've been like, can you fix this? Can you fix that? And then I end up spending 8 hours on something that I'm not being paid for. So
100%. Yes, you should have contracts no matter what stage you were at. And that experience that you're talking about right now is exactly how you sort of learn that. It's like you make that mistake like once, and then you're like, okay, I don't want to waste 8 hours again without being paid sort of like an extra fee, right? So contracts can be really, really helpful because it can outline expectations. Not only it protects both you, and it also protects the person who is commissioning you. Again, oftentimes it can set up sort of an expected date that the work will be done by, which is really great for the person who's commissioning the work, right? They know when they're going to get their piece. But at the same time, you know, you can factor in things like that, like, you know, the language can be perfectly sweet and nice and polite. You can say like, happy to make alterations to get you exactly what you want. But just understand that, you know, those alterations take time and they will be subject to an alteration fee. And that's not just with commission work, but, you know, I, in my studio practice, and I am nowhere near Catherine's level, right? I'm just like a little fine artist that like makes artwork in my house / Webster Studios sometimes. But I work with life casting. So I have contracts that I use whenever I bring models into my studio space. And I always have a meeting with them, and I put it in writing, the expectations that I have of them as a model, but then that they also have of me as a model. You know, when you're working with other people's bodies, you know, you have to be respectful of, you know, what they are agreeing to and how they want to be represented. And so you have those conversations ahead of time, you put it down in writing. And that way they know that like, if you're taking a mold off of their body, that you might be using those parts into perpetuity, but you need to be outlining which parts of their body you're allowed to use and in what way. It also, you know, you can get liabilities. So contracts are important, but also liability waivers. Lauren can be really important because, and this is some of the stuff that she potentially was working on with those larger public projects. She probably has liability waivers for her contracted workers, you know, because basically you want to protect yourself from being sued should someone get injured within your studio space or while working on a project that you were on. So there are, you know, liability waivers that can exist that can kind of protect you from a situation where, you know, if they do something stupid, you have already had them sign a liability waiver saying like you are accepting the responsibility of taking your own safety precautions within, you know, the expanse of this studio space and this project. You know, you might encounter ladders. Please follow ladder safety, you know, things like that. So I paperwork is very, very important. Another thing that I want to point out is when you start working with galleries and placing pieces or placing a lot of pieces, let's say for a solo show. Oh, Jade, can we get a contract about reading? Or can we contract? Can we get a reading about creating contracts and just how to get commissions and organizing the process of pricing? Whoa, this is a lot. Okay, creating contracts. Contracts. How to get commissions. And organizing the process of pricing and communicating through that. So pricing as related to commissions. Pricing with commissions. Jade, I will look for it. I don't know if I will find it, but I will do my due diligence and I will try. Yeah, and to that end, this isn't stuff that is easy to find, and it's not stuff that people teach to you, right? Like nobody taught me any of this stuff. They didn't say like, you should be doing this. You should have contracts for this. I will say that she did mention the Lawyers for Artists in St. Louis. That is an excellent place to kind of field some of these questions, and their website. If you guys will give me 1 second, I'll see if I can pull it up. Bear with me. I think it's the VLAA, the Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts in St. Louis. We live in an amazing city because we have resources like the VLAA, which is crazy. They do like workshops where you can learn more about these types of like legality processes, this contract building, creating like tax documents, all of that stuff. They do free workshops for artists and creatives to attend. So I would definitely check out that that website that I just put in the chat, VLAA.org. We live in a city where we have this great nonprofit organization that literally the whole point of why they exist is to offer free legal and accounting advice for artists. So yeah, that is an incredible resource. But again, Jade, I'll look into and see if I can find some readings that kind of like from a beginner standpoint begin to break that down for you guys. Again, we're running out of time. I wish that like I could have you guys for all 4 years and we could just keep doing this back and forth thing throughout, but we don't have that set up yet at Webster. But I do also want to say, if at any point in time you guys have any questions or you're curious about something, just because you leave my class does not mean that you can't contact me in the future. If you ever have a question or you're curious about something or you don't know where to look for a piece of information in terms of like professional practices, feel free to email me. Even if I don't have the answer, Google exists, and I'm definitely willing to kind of like dig into it a little bit for you guys, even after you guys get out of this class. I'm always around, at least for the time being. I'm at Webster, and you guys should consider me a resource as much as you'd like to, at least. Okay, so what was I feel like I lost my train of thought here. Okay, creating contracts and getting commissions. I was gonna say, if you guys ever are beginning to get into group shows or beginning to get into solo shows and you're working within a gallery system, proper professional galleries will have contracts for you to sign, okay? This is very important. They should have a contract that basically it's a lending agreement that you'll sign that basically says you as the artist are lending X, Y, and Z pieces that are valued at whatever price point you set up, and for a specific amount of time. So it would be the run of show, right? And usually within those contracts, it will specify who is responsible for the shipping and receiving of the work. So let's say you get a show in, I don't know, some university gallery in like Cincinnati, Ohio, right? So you get your first solo show at University of Cincinnati, Ohio. That's great. Universities are excellent places to show your work. An established organization like that should have a contract and a lending agreement that lets you know that your work is not only going to be safe in that gallery, but that it will also be insured. So you will be given a lending agreement from that gallery, and you will also be given a, they will ask you for information for their insurance purposes. And that's because when you show at a professional gallery, this is how you can tell the difference between people that are like kind of trying to like be professional and people that are actually professional. They will insure the work for the duration of the show. And you want to make sure that all of that paperwork gets done before you ever send somebody your pieces. Because you want that confirmation for your own records, because if your pieces get damaged during the run of that show, that insurance policy that that institution has should be paying you for the price of either fixing the work or for completely replacing it in general. So this is another reason why you want to effectively think about how your pricing works, because what if something happens to it? Not like oh, somebody buys it, yay me, I made a sale. But what if you just made your baby, you birthed it into the world, it gets to see 2 days of light in a gallery, and then some person at the opening spills a glass of red wine all over it, and then it's ruined. Like, how is that going to make you feel about all of the time that you spent on that piece of artwork? You're going to be pretty pissed, right? So you want to make sure that you're valuing the amount of time that went into the art piece, so that whenever Liv said she'd be throwing hands. I know, right? You want to make sure that you have all of that documentation in place so that you're protected and that you will be compensated accordingly should damage take place. Now, in some of those documents, you know, they might say, okay, we will take the responsibility of your artwork as long as it is underneath the roof of our gallery. However, they might not cover the responsibility of if the work gets damaged via shipping, right? Because we're doing this show in Cincinnati, Ohio. That is not in Missouri. You're probably not going to drive all the way to Cincinnati, which means that you got to ship your work. So that's when you want to be mindful about how you're getting your work from point A to point B. And you're probably going to want to pay the little bit of extra money that it costs to have your piece insured in the shipping process. And this is all random information that nobody tells you when you're like a young artist and you're just like, I'll do whatever. I'll say yes to anything. And this isn't even just when you're a young artist. So that example that I gave you guys about, like, you know, you just made your masterpiece and it only got to live for like 2 days and then it got damaged. That literally happened to me. That happened to me in a gallery in St. Louis right after I moved here. My like lovely pied de resistance like piece that I have, that was like one of the most important pieces that I've ever made, is a full-size, life-size, like hyper-realistic figure. It only got to exist for about 5 days in that gallery, and it got damaged irreparably almost. And I did not do my due diligence and follow up and make sure that the insurance paperwork was filed. And it turns out that the gallery director had not filed the insurance paperwork. And not only that, they moved the sculpture multiple times, which then prevented, even if I did have insurance, they would not have been able to appropriately come in and assess the situation and decide if they would pay out because the piece had moved. So like if your piece ever gets damaged, nobody should move it, nobody should touch it, and they should be documenting exactly what happened and the damage that occurred and the extent of the damage. Because an insurance assessor is going to have to come in and figure out if the gallery truly is at fault and whether the insurance is going to cover it. So yeah, I had a piece almost irreparably damaged. I never got any money in return for the damage of that piece. And that's just something that's a lesson I had to learn. And it's one of the reasons why I'm like talking to you guys about it today, because like, I want you to never have to go through that. You know, it probably cost me, I don't know, probably at least $1,000 to fix that piece. I mourned for a year and it just sat broken in the corner of my studio. I still have its original arms up here. If you guys can see them in my window, those are the original arms of my piece. But yeah, I had to wait until I had an enticing enough opportunity to show that work again for me to even get motivated to fix it using my own funds, because I knew it was going to cost a lot. So I would highly, highly recommend just knowing that not only do you have to fill out those documents, but always ask for copies for your own records, because it's going to be really important for you to like cover your own, you know, investment that you've made into your art practice. I will also use this opportunity to let you know that there is a type of private artist insurance. So I actually ended up doing this after that happened, where you can have insurance on your own pieces and your own art practice, say like materials in your studio, anything like that. Let's say like there's a water leak in your apartment or your studio, and then a bunch of pieces get damaged because of that. If you have a plan with a private artist insurance company, they would cover something like that. So like, that's kind of like a weird act of God, but they would cover it because you have private artist insurance. Now, at the beginning of your career, you're probably not going to do that. But once you get a little bit more established, you have a solid studio practice, you might want to look into it, because that insurance will protect your artwork when it's in your studio, when it's in transit to another location, and also when it is at an exhibition. So it's sort of this all-encompassing art insurance that can protect you. And that is, I believe it's called ACT insurance. It's like artists and craft insurance. I can send you guys the link. Let me find it. Yeah, ACT insurance. If I still have it. Okay, I don't still have it. Anyways, I will try to look for the name of that insurance profile and send it to you guys just for future reference. You guys are an undergrad, you're probably not going to be doing that right now, getting an insurance policy on your paintings, but it's nice to just know that it exists, and you can sort of save it in your files. That way you can remember what it's called. I didn't even know that stuff existed until, you know, I already had a piece damaged, and then I was like, there has to be a better way. And apparently there is. And then I found that insurance company. Okay. So now that I did a real life paperwork tangent here, I know, again, we're covering subjects that not everybody necessarily is interested in at this exact point in time. However, hopefully you guys took a look at some of the materials that I provided for you guys based upon how to apply to graduate school. Now, I want to just briefly state that I primarily gave you resources for how to apply to an MFA program specifically. I realize that a lot of you guys are designers, and that some of you guys might actually be interested in looking at, you know, secondary education in a different field, perhaps like a master's of business and communication, to sort of act in tandem with your design degree so that you can be sort of a holistic business owner. I understand that, but I wanted to just start with an MFA just because we're working within the art department and that's going to pertain to more people. However, a lot of the information that is in what I gave you will be pertinent for really any grad school application experience, because they're all very similar. So a lot of it sort of carries over regardless of what department and or degree you would be seeking. And I can answer some questions about applying to different types of graduate programs. Obviously, I cannot speak to every single type of graduate program, but I have some information on some. So feel free to ask any questions that may have popped up in your mind as you were sort of reading over that material. What'd you guys think? I tried to give you like video resources so it wasn't like super boring to learn about. Any questions right off the bat? Any?
I guess my major question is, so is there any way you can teach without an MFA?
No.
Okay.
Not at the college level. I'll put it this way. At certain community colleges, they used to allow individuals who had a high level of industry experience teach courses without necessarily a terminal degree, but it is very, very rare. So most of the time, if teaching at the college or university level is your ultimate goal, that is one of the main reasons why I would advocate for someone to go to graduate school. Because I think it's very feasible and very doable to become a successful artist without having gone to graduate school. Don't get me wrong, like it's not everyone would be able to do it without a graduate program experience. You would have to be incredibly good at sort of self-monitoring your behavior and developing a individual art practice just on your own without sort of like the specific time and focus and structure of a graduate program. Some people can do that. Some people sort of need that structure in order to survive. But at the same time, it's like, eventually you're going to graduate. Eventually you're going to leave academia either through your BFA or your MFA. And at that point, the only person who's going to carry you within the art world is you. So if you haven't set up like a sort of studio practice that you can sustain outside of the structure of an academic setting, then there's no degree in the world that can help you. You eventually just need to become an autonomous, creative being who has the motivation and the wherewithal to wake up each day and make stuff. And it's only going to become harder because, you know, the real world exists. You have to pay your bills. You're not always going to have clear, dedicated, devoted time just to your art practice. So you have to be the type of person that can figure out how to carve out that time and create it for yourself. Which is easier said than done. So graduate school is one of those things that like people like to, some people understand that they're not ready to sort of create that practice for themselves. And they think that graduate school will sort of hone those skills and help them get to that point. It's like, it pushes you further and it provides you not only with, the time and space to work, like in a completely dedicated sense to your studio practice, but it also gives you mentors. It gives you peers that also are working within, you know, similar creative fields as well, all of which sort of wrap up into what will become part of your future network. So in a lot of the readings and in some of the videos, you know, they were emphasizing where do you want to place yourself, right? Location is everything. Like, where do you want to be in the art world? Do you want to be in the New York scene? Then you should probably pick a school that is, if not in New York, it should be one of the schools that could easily transfer you into New York once you graduate. Lauren is saying post-baccalaureate studies, question mark. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, like that one video of the professor talking about it, she kind of, I don't know, she said it was like an alternative to, not an alternative to grad school, but it was like a little bit less than grad school.
Yes.
And like, so that kind of was appealing to me. Like, it seems like a better way to explore like other art practices of mine other than graphic design. So
yeah. So I think they mentioned two things that, you know, if you aren't sure if you're ready for graduate school, or if you just simply are not sure if graduate school is worth the investment of you know, money, finances, but also your time, and also potentially relocating. There's two really good options for how you can take your experience as an undergraduate, which, like she also said in that video, is really diverse and fragmented with your experience of learning. You know, it's the first time that like you might take intaglio printing. It's the first time that you might be exposed to the ceramic arts. It's They diversify your bachelor's education for a specific reason. It is because, you know, Rome was not built in a day. Your art practice is not going to be built overnight. It exposes you to various ways of making. But once you get out of, you know, your BFA program or your BA program, that is when you kind of need to develop your own artistic practice or your own design practice. And for some people, they still like to have the community that is available in a structured setting, and also the network possibilities. So again, with you know, the best and worst part about the art world is the fact that like it's all networking, right? They say the art world is very, very small, and I honestly think that that's frighteningly true once you actually like spend enough years in it. So the two options that they present you with are getting a post-baccalaureate degree, which can vary, but oftentimes it's a one-year program. It's a one-year program. Usually they require you to attend it in person, but for something that's like 1 year, that feels a little bit more feasible. Let's say like, you know, you could, if you're living in the dorms on campus for undergrad, you could very easily apply to a baccalaureate program, you know, get in and then make an easy transition from a BFA to a post-bac program. And you only really have to account for the living expenses and moving for a single year. You're not exactly like committing to wherever that locale is. You're committing for a year, but committing to, you know, 12 months in a location is a lot different than like picking up your entire life and moving for 2 to 3 years, right? Because it's a big deal. It's like if you're going straight from a BFA to a post-bac, or if you just want to try out a post-bac, let's say after a gap year, again, accounting for a year is a lot easier to do. And what it does is it gets you back to access to a studio. So you would again be in a similar situation where you have a studio to go to every single day. You have studio mates and peers that you would be able to have critiques with and studio visits. And then you would also have, you know, a series of faculty and mentors. So it's an extension of your undergraduate education, but at the same time, it's pushing you towards autonomy. It's pushing you towards being like a self-sustaining practicing artist. So the structure of it is going to be very different. You know, like you in undergrad, you have very specific courses that are tailored to specific, you know, methods of making ceramics, painting, illustration, graphic design, into more broad level discussions that you might be having. So instead of, let's say, taking a class, you know, in ceramics, you know, you might have a symposium, a post-baccalaureate symposium on, you know, expanded methods in new media. You know, they might like give like some broad title that doesn't necessarily mean one specific thing, but it's meant to be all encompassing. That like they're going to expose you to ways of cross-disciplinary making, sort of combined with theory. So a thing that is left out of undergraduate education a lot of time is the thick of where to place your artwork within an art historical context and what the theory is behind contemporary art historical context. So that's when they would start giving you readings on, you know, the history of feminism in art. That's when they would start to expose you to gender studies and queer based practices in art. That's when they start folding in all of the conceptual ideas that you might potentially be placing yourself within. So a post-bac really can sort of act as a precursor to an MFA program. Now, which is not to say that a post-baccalaureate is a prerequisite to an MFA program. It is not. You can get into an MFA program without a post-baccalaureate certificate. It does help though in the admissions process, because if they see a post-bac certificate, they're going to be like, oh, this person takes their education and their artist practice seriously, and they want to push themselves, and they already have taken this step. So we think that they're definitely ready to take the next step. I mean, I don't know. I went to grad school with a couple of people that did post-bac programs. It buys you more time. It buys you more time, and it gives you a studio space. And it's also like a wonderful experience because a lot of post-bac programs, they don't have them everywhere. So you have to look at the ones that do exist. And, you know, it's potentially the opportunity to like go to Seattle or go, you know, spend a year in a city that you've never gone to. And again, it's like some of those cities can be very expensive. You know, so you get the chance to like commit to that city for like a small period of time, and then you can like peace out after you get your certificate and then truly choose what your next steps are. But again, the other option that they gave you was you could apply to residencies. A lot of people think that artist residencies are exclusively reserved for those who already have an MFA degree. They aren't. You could apply to them right now. You don't even have to be done with your undergrad degree to apply to a residency. Now, you want to, again, as with everything that we've talked about in this class pertaining to the professional world, you want to do your research, and you want to make sure that you're not wasting your time and or application fee money and applying to a residency that only accepts people with MFAs. That would be a waste of your money at this point, right? So you want to do your research and make sure that you're applying to the residencies that you would actually have a chance at getting. So there are specific residencies that cater to people who have just received a BFA degree. You know, there's specific residencies that only want new and emerging artists, and you guys would be considered new and emerging artists. So there are also residencies that you can only apply to if you have just received a BFA degree, and there are a different subset of residencies. They oftentimes call them fellowships that like you would apply to if you had just received your MFA degree. So again, there's like this weird little ladder system that you can like slowly climb if you do your research appropriately. You know, you could get a postbac, then go to graduate school. You could go to a residency while you're in graduate school, but then you could apply to a fellowship that you are only allowed to apply to the first year after you receive your master's degree. So if you like line up all your ducks, you can kind of create a nice trajectory path for yourself. These are great questions. Yeah, there again, you don't have to take the MFA route. There are other ways. Again, if you know that you're a person that needs structure, an MFA definitely can help. It also you should only do it if you're committing to sort of taking your art practice to the next level and you want to be completely immersed in the studio. And you're ready for that feedback, and it's going to be critical and it's going to be harsh and it's probably going to make you cry at least once. But your work completely transforms in that process. Most people I know, they went into grad school making entirely different work than they make now. And it kind of gives you the tools to kind of be really critical and take big leaps and bounds with your art practice. It fosters a kind of confidence that I don't necessarily know that you have prior to going into it. All right. Other comments or questions? What else do we got? I know it was a lot of information and a lot of very specific information about how to apply. Does anybody have any inquiries into the line of what it takes to apply, where to apply, how do you even begin to start that research? I'm looking at you, Emily, because this was your requested information week, so come at me.
Yeah, I was just looking down. When I was reading this, I was totally stressing out because I was trying to think of like, what am I gonna do? Because I want to teach, but I was like, there are some good points. I feel like multiple of them said to not go to grad school directly after graduating, like continuing on like directly after, like not taking a year off. So I was just trying to think what I would do. And then because I was like, overall, I think I do want to go to grad school, but I'm just like, I guess it's more personal stuff, but I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in between then. Like,
so what year are you in, Emily?
I'm a senior, but I have another year left.
Okay. All right. So you have that year potentially. Yeah. So yeah, you're sort of at that point where you're like, okay, do I apply? Do I not apply? What are the pros and cons? So one of the biggest ways you can kind of make that decision, and it's a personal decision for everybody, right? One of the biggest ways that you can kind of get a little bit of guidance there is talk to your professors, show them your work, and ask them if they think that you're ready. And I know that sounds really scary, and you may or may not want to hear the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But you might be surprised by the answer. So, and I'm not just talking about just the professor you work with the most, but truly go to the professors that you feel like you have a good relationship with, show them your portfolio, tell them about your goals overall about what you want to do, and see if they think that you're ready. Because one of the main factors, and I'm sure you guys saw this after watching the videos and reading the things, is the biggest portion of getting into an MFA program is your portfolio good enough? Is it where it needs to be? So yeah, I would throw together a mock portfolio of what you would submit. Or, it can be an amount of images plus some extra ones, right? But if you have a portfolio that has a body of work that has that consistent conceptual thread throughout it, you might be surprised. Like they might think that you're ready. And especially if you're kind of like on the fence and you're like, okay, but like, what am I going to do in that gap year? Like, the other option is start to look at options for what to do in that gap year.
Yeah.
Look for internships, look for, jobs that you think would not only give you an insight into the art world, but would also, potentially help you pay bills, which it may or may not do that, but just try to engineer a situation where you can get a little bit more art world experience, be able to sustain yourself for a year, but you got to have time to make more work, and you have to be committed to making more work, because you can't just apply with the work that you made in undergrad a year later. That's not what taking a gap year is about. If you're going to take a gap year, you should be using it, and you should be using it to create new conceptually relevant work. Like that's when you start to, it's like the first time that you like practice being a professional artist. Even if you don't like show during that year, you should be making during that year. But if you don't have a plan, then you're just going to end up like working as a barista, 45 hours a week. And then you're not going to have any time or energy to devote to your practice. And that's where a lot of people, kind of suffer, is that they take a gap year, and that gap year turns into a gap lifetime. It turns into a gap that you've fallen into. So you don't want that. You want to make sure that you have like a strategic plan if you are going to take time off. But like I said, when I was a crazy overachiever when I was in undergrad. Like I became an art major, and then I was just like, I'm going to do it all. And I constantly was trying to get myself into shows. I was like taking a special topics and curating class, and we curated shows, and I was constantly trying to beef up my resume. And so obviously I was just like, I'm ready for grad school. Let's do this. I'm going to apply. And I will say the thing that the woman said in the one video, she said that the main reason why you may not want to go straight through, it's because your senior year of your undergraduate degree officially becomes even harder, because you're having to do all of the work that is associated with applying to graduate school. Yeah, if you're thinking about going all the way like straight through, hello, I did that. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know if it was the best thing that I've ever done, but at the same time, I don't regret going to grad school. But I will say that I was really young. I was probably the youngest person that ever went through my graduate program, because I technically stepped foot on campus at USF as a graduate student at the age of 21. And I turned 22 my first year in grad school. So I don't know, I was really green, we'll put it that way, when I started grad school. And I oftentimes look back and wish that I'd kind of gotten a little bit more world experience. But at the same time, it's like when I was in undergrad, I knew I had momentum in my undergraduate education, and I knew that I didn't want to lose it. And I thought that if I took a year off, that I might lose that passion, and I might get caught up in, the gears of the rat race, if you will. And I just didn't want to do that. I was like, I have momentum now. Let's get this done. Let's start the rest of my life. So it really just depends on where you place yourself within that kind of dialogue. But ask your professors. Your professors potentially know your level of readiness. And it also, you know, it's opening the door for you guys to have a conversation, and they'll tell you about their experience and what they wish they would have done differently. You know, one of the biggest things that I think you realize when you start thinking about this process and you start thinking about, you know, a post-grad education, you start to realize that your professors are people. And they're just like you, and that they were like, you know, undergrad students trying to figure all of this out, you know, back in their day. And yeah, it's having those conversations and having those dialogues. That's when you start to create really good relationships with your professors. And it's those relationships that are ultimately those conversations are probably going to lead to mentorship. And that mentorship is going to lead to your letters of recommendation one day. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen some of your work. I haven't seen all of it, so I can't really speak to that specifically. But I see strong conceptual threads in your work. So it might just be about like taking all of that stuff that you've been working on like the past year or two, and then like creating a body of work outside of academia, and then experiencing that, and then applying with that work. You know, when you're not surrounded by like Webster oriented stuff, and you're out in the real world and you're taking in different, you're consuming different imagery, and you're consuming like different sources of inspiration outside of like a structured space, because your work might slowly pivot, or it might become vastly different even over the course of a couple of months. Something happens when like the weight of like academia gets off your shoulders. Granted, you also then take on the weight of the real world, and that's a whole different experience. But yeah, you start to realize that like some of the rules don't apply to you anymore, because you look at them like a coat at a thrift store, and you're like, that doesn't fit me. I don't believe that. Even though I was trained in that way, I don't believe it. So yeah. What else are you worried about? Have you talked to anybody else about grad programs or the idea of teaching?
Somewhat, not really. I've kind of asked around like, hey, how did you get this job? But not really super much. Yeah. I used to be like a K through 12 art education major. Mm-hmm. And I changed that like in 2019, like at the end of fall semester. So
I'll put it this way. I would look into what avenues there are for that certification process. And I would potentially look at that as a backup plan, or something just to keep in your back pocket, simply because, and it was in one of the documents that I sent you guys, the applying to MFA programs sort of PDF from Micah. It specifically said, I think it was on page 1, why you shouldn't get an MFA. Don't get an MFA assuming that you can easily get a full-time teaching job afterward. These jobs are hard to come by and are highly competitive.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and I was like, oh.
Well, I'll put it this way. Depending on the field that you go in, so from media to media, there are more job opportunities in some, and there are less job opportunities in others. So certain fields have higher turnover rates than others for whatever reason, or certain fields are growing and have a higher demand. You know, let's say like video art and new media, that has grown exponentially over the past 10 years. So there are tons of jobs for like video artists and people that specialize in new media, and ways to ways to, you know, edit. They want people that are very good at teaching editing software and different technical things. So if you end up going into a field and you have a lot of that very niche, technical, specific knowledge, then yeah, you might be the exact person ready for that job. But you know, if you're going to go into painting or printmaking, it's like there's going to be less of those because you know, that's just the nature of the beast. People get tenure track jobs, and the whole idea with tenure is that you get that job and then you stay in that job until you retire, right? So that's what leads to this idea of you know, there not being a giant proliferation of those jobs every single year, and the fact that you know, they then become very competitive because there aren't a large quantity of jobs available. Now, this is not to say that there aren't jobs. There definitely are. But those sort of like golden ticket jobs, the ones that are tenure track, the ones that pay really well, the ones that have health insurance and benefits, those are really hard to come by. And that's just the nature of the beast. I don't know if you guys know this, but the vast majority of college classes are not actually taught by tenured faculty. They aren't. They just aren't. Not just in the art department, but university-wide, it's built on adjunct or contingent faculty. And I gotta tell you from experience as a person who is an adjunct and contingent faculty, it's not everything that it's cracked up to be. It's hard. And you know, it's difficult. You have to do the exact same job that somebody else does, but you're not paid a yearly salary. You're not paid, you know, you don't have any like professional practice benefits where they give you like money to help cover offset costs for your research. You don't get health insurance. Those things don't exist. So you have to sort of factor that in. And that's why I say that like looking into getting a certification for K through 12 is a way that you can always make sure that you can get a job, can pay your bills, and you can still teach at the college level. You just won't necessarily be teaching full-time at the college level. And in the interim, you might be teaching like a really cool, you know, group of high school students at like a fine arts college, or not at a fine arts college, but at like a fine arts high school, you know, like a magnet program. They actually will pay you even more if you have a master's degree. Like there's a high school in Michigan that's like crazy good for fine arts. It's called Interlochen. And they pay crazy amounts for their faculty for high school, and almost all of their faculty have master's degrees. So I know not everybody wants to hear all of that information, and it's like the nitty-gritty truth of it all, but yeah, I prefer to let you know the truth of what it is to kind of teach college and how hard it is, because not everybody tells you the truth. And I'd rather you have all of the information before you go making these investments. But at the same time, I love what I do. And it's rewarding in other ways. So just depends on the type of person you are, Emily. Depends on the type of person you are. What else? I don't know, you know, I don't know if you guys got to looking at all of those videos or information, but I do want to say that video of the woman who is breaking down how to write a good statement of purpose. First of all, that's just a great video. Like, she breaks it down paragraph by paragraph of what each paragraph should entail. And like, that was a resource. It was created during quarantine. Like that video was made like in 2020. And I gotta say, I wish I had that video when I applied to graduate school, because she does a perfect job of breaking down exactly what you should be saying in a statement of purpose, exactly what they're looking for, and how to sell yourself in a way that's so hard to do. You don't know how to like say, hey, I should be picked for this class or for this, you know, graduating cohort. She does a perfect way, paragraph by paragraph, explaining exactly what you should be talking about. So if you are interested in applying, Emily, that like make notes from that video, because like perfect. Same thing, the PDF that I gave you guys from Micah, that has that double page of resources at the bottom of that document that gives you even more websites and organizations that you could go to for scholarship information, financial information, all of that. That is incredibly detailed, and that's definitely something that you want to sort of save and put in your files if you ever think that this is an option that you want to pursue. These are things that like I didn't have, and I would just go up to my professors and be like, help, what should I be thinking about? What should I be looking at? And they did their best, and God bless them, and I still love them to this day, but they didn't sit down and actually give me handouts or give me direct resources that that I was able to find for you guys. So I hope you guys bookmark them and just keep them in mind for the future. I know it's not for everybody, but it can be an incredibly awarding experience for those that decide to go. Now, I do want to briefly touch on what it would take to get into a graduate program that is not an MFA. So if you're an art historian, you know, you're going to follow different directions to get into a PhD program. It's going to involve actually really a lot. Hold on, we got to let Sydney back in here. So if you're applying to graduate programs that are outside of a fine art sphere, there are different requirements. A lot of them stay the same. You're still going to need a statement of intent. You're still probably going to need a CV or a resume. And you potentially might need a portfolio for a lot of them, but that portfolio might take a different, you know, sort of form, right? So if you're applying to, you know, a master's degree in, you know, design and mass communications, your portfolio is going to be much more design oriented, and probably will include a copy that you've written for, you know, prospective clients and or commissions and things like that. If you are going for art history, you're going to have writing samples of academic writing. That can be samples from art history papers. It could be samples of critical, you know, responses to perhaps museum shows that you go and see. You could literally write a critical response or a review. All of those things are things that you would want to consider and keep copies of and have ready. Art history programs specifically ask for writing samples. They also will ask if you have been published. So if you're looking to go into the truly PhD academic realm, they're going to be looking at whether or not you have been published, if you've been a co-author on a paper already. These are things that would be much better answered by Ryan Gregg or Jeff Hughes, but I can sort of briefly touch on that. You would need writing samples. That's where, you know, your statement of intent probably is going to carry a lot more weight, because they're looking at writing, because you're looking at becoming an art historian, an academic, and a writer. So your statement of intent is going to be very, very important, as would your writing samples. Now, a lot of programs specifically for art history and or any other PhD program, and a lot of master's programs, including mass communication, business, any school like that, they are going to require you to take an exam called the GRE. The GRE is sort of, it's sort of like the SAT that you guys took like to get into college, but the GRE is a general exam of you know, academic knowledge that they use to gauge where you are at post attending a baccalaureate program. So it's just the next step of standardized testing. And so if you're a person who doesn't like standardized testing, that is one of those things that you would probably want to follow the timeline breakdown that I gave you guys. That's on one of that handout from Micah. It specifically says, this is when you want to schedule, taking your GRE. And then it also has in, this is when you want to schedule retaking your GRE, should you not be satisfied with your original scores. It's the exact same thing as the SAT. It's just, it goes by a different name. Not every single graduate degree requires a GRE. Not every single school requires that you submit GRE scores. So if you're very, very opposed to standardized testing, just know that some programs, even PhD programs in specific fields, will not require you to take the GRE. Now, that's going to require further research, but you know what? Applying to graduate school in general, the basic rule of thumb is that you have to do your research, right? The biggest thing that they sort of like hammered over and over and over again in both the articles, but also in the videos that I shared with you guys, is that you have to do your research because you're trying to find the place where you would fit. And not every single school, not every single program is going to be a good fit for you. And one of the things that I always was told by my professors was that if you've done your research correctly and you have applied to the correct places, they will want you just as much as you want to go to them. And a lot of the time that translates into financial opportunities for attending a certain program. Case in point, if you do your research and you apply to a program that really, really wants you, they might offer you a full tuition waiver. So already right off the bat, you'll get accepted. You might get a full tuition waiver, which covers your cost of tuition to go to the school. Now that may or may not cover any fees associated with going with the school. As you guys know, tuition isn't everything. You then have like a technology fee, and then you have a library fee, and then you have a this fee and a that fee, and half of the time they go up every single semester because academia makes no sense. But, if they're willing to cover your full tuition, that's a big chunk of the pie, right? Now, I will say, just because you get a full tuition waiver, you need to factor in that you're potentially going to be completely uprooting and relocating your entire life to a different city, which means that you're not going to be living with your parents. You're not going to be, in the dorms where everything is kind of like cheap and like is a part of the cost of the university experience. So even if your tuition fee is covered, you have to figure out how to budget and cover cost of living, meaning rent, utilities, all of that, and money for supplies for actually creating the artwork that you want to make in the program, or buying the books if it's, say, like a communication degree or an art history degree. And you also have to be able to just your everyday cost of living, like things that you would buy, like toothpaste and, like gas for your car so you can get to school. So just because you get a full tuition waiver, that does, that's amazing. That is awesome if you get to the point where you get that. But just keep that in mind when you're weighing whether or not it's financially responsible for you to go to that program. Now, if you get into Yale and they give you a full tuition waiver, yeah, I'd say just go. Like cover if they're covering the tuition, like, and you can go to Yale and then you become one of the elite graduates that gets to go to Yale for graduate school for free. Yeah, I'd say it's probably worth whatever, you might incur in terms of cost of living at that point, because that program is so distinguished and connects you so tightly into an art world that is very hard to break into, that you will probably reap the benefits of your investment at that point. But yeah, I mean, these are all things that you want to consider, but I say if you do your research correctly, you might end up with a full tuition waiver. You might end up with, a stipend. You might end up with a teaching assistantship, Emily. That's how I ended up at USF. They offered me a full tuition waiver. They offered me a stipend for the first year that I was there. And then they offered me a graduate assistantship that allowed me to, for like the first year and a half, I think I was a paid teaching assistant. But then for the last half of my program that I was there, I was teaching my own classes. Nobody was looking over my shoulder. I was like 22 or 23, and I was teaching my own sculpture classes at that point. So if teaching is something that you're interested in, you're going to want to look at universities that will allow you to do so. And that was a 3-year program. I would say the one good decision that I made, even though I went straight through, is I chose a program that was 3 years rather than 2, because it gave me that extra year to mature as an artist, but also as an educator. All right, I know that was like all of the information thrown at you guys in a giant soliloquy. Okay, we are about to run out of time. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Is anybody looking, or has anybody considered what it might be to get a degree outside of art? Is anybody looking to go down that business route to kind of like become a small business owner eventually, and you want to make sure that you're like set up for it? Jade, I'm looking at you. I know you're an entrepreneur. I know you are.
Yeah, I definitely want to do something more business oriented, but I don't really know exactly what I need for that, because I kind of was thinking lately, like, even though I'm doing, like, my emphasis is graphic design, I'm still like a fine arts major, so I'm taking a lot more fine arts than business. And so I don't know if I should switch my major to something in the communications building so that I get more of that kind of stuff, or if I should just try to minor in something, or just like try to take more classes and do what I'm doing, like trying to get a certificate in motion graphics and entrepreneurship. But I don't know.
I think certificates are a great route. Certificates are a great route. Minoring is a great route. It seems like you're interested in the fine art and the design from like a core perspective. So I don't know if I would just completely change to communications. Yeah. I don't know if I would do that. But minoring in business or communications 100% will only like benefit you. And I will also say that there are specific degrees that are like 2-year master's degrees, or even certificate programs that you can go to that are in like arts administration. So you can get a master's in arts administration, which sort of gives you all of the tools, not only to work within a fine arts organization, but it's all of those business tools that are attached to working within a fine arts organization. So if you, let's say I were to get a master's degree in fine arts administration, that would open you up to applying to some of those positions at, like, say, the St. Louis Art Museum, or the Contemporary Art Museum, or the Pulitzer, or let's just say the Met. So it would be working on the administration side of things. So if you're interested in one of those, types of jobs where it's not necessarily going to be, the job isn't inherently creative, but it's the business of sort of creating these artistic organizations, or these artistic institutions. If you're interested possibly in doing that, that arts admin degree is a really great one to get, and they don't offer them everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's,
I think I still want to go in more of a graphic design route, so maybe less museum and more like.
See, that's where I would potentially encourage you to either just take business classes on the side, maybe even at like a community college or something where they're cheaper. Or if you decided to get like I'll put it this way, if you were to just decide that you wanted those business classes and you didn't just want to take them piecemeal, but you wanted it to add up to something that you could put on your resume, so that it makes you look better. and you wanted to get a master's degree, I would say look into online programs.
Oh, true.
You won't have to move. You won't have to move. So you're not going to have to pay for like, you know, moving costs, or like they're not quite as intense. You would be able to like carry a job while doing an online business program.
Because you said community college, but then like I want to stay here, but I also want to save money. But can I do both of those things at once?
Yeah, if you want to, you know, if you want to get a master's degree and you want to stay here and you want to sort of stay within that like really financially feasible realm, like look at online programs. Like, you know, you can get a degree from like the University of Washington State, but you stay in sweet, sweet Missouri, and all of a sudden you have a master's in, you know, business and communications or something. Plus you were able to keep your daytime job, you know, like that's another thing that I want to point out, Emily, is like not all programs are the same, and some of them are low residency programs or completely online. So from a financial feasibility standpoint, those oftentimes can be really great for people that like don't want to accumulate any amount of debt, and they want to have something that they can do while you know, keeping sort of a full 9-to-5 job. Now, would I recommend like an online MFA? Not entirely, because that's not the point of an MFA. An MFA is for you to like get into it, get into the thick of making, respond to peers, respond to people, make connections. You're not really trying to do that in business school. In business school, you're trying to learn how to run a business. Now, you'll probably make friends along the way, but that's not the point of business school. But the low residency programs are really great. That one that they mentioned in that one video, Emily, Bard, which is a school in New York, that is a low residency program. You wouldn't have to move there necessarily, but it's sort of a weird entry point to where you could get into the New York art scene without having to move to New York, is through Bard, which is an excellent program. I've known 1 or 2 people that have graduated out of there, and they really enjoyed that experience. And I think it's a 4-year one, so you get like, it's nice and leisurely. It's like, it's only high pressure for a small amount of time when you like are on campus. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we wrap it up? I know that was a lot, and we barely even scratched the surface because it is a very large topic. And there's a bajillion things you could get a master's and or PhD in. And, you know, I could teach an entire course just on like the idea of like post-secondary education. But we don't have that time. This was meant to just be a brief overview of some of the things you should be considering and or research you should be compiling if this is something that might interest you in the future. And like I said, a lot of you have time. So now is just the time to like start thinking about it, gather information, create a little folder on your computer, and start compiling information. That way you're not scrambling to get the information when you're under a deadline. Okay. No more questions or comments? New?
I have something I want to ask you about, but I won't make everyone stay for it.
Okay, all right, you can stay and I'll try to answer it for you. Okay, oh, next week we have John Allen, who is actually a friend of mine from grad school. So I think he's actually going to be logging into our conversation after his talk on Friday. And so if you have any more questions about the art world, what it's like to get outside of graduate school, how do you make it work? What do you do? How do you teach? How do you continue making artwork when you're in the real world? He's going to be here to sort of be in dialogue with all of us and answer some of those questions, or at least answer his experience and things that, you know, he's done outside of academia. He's a painter, printmaker, drawer, photographer, man about town, jack of all trades, and just a really delightful person. So I hope you guys are going to be able to make it next week. It will be almost the last one, second to last. And yeah, I think until then, in terms of homework, and I'll obviously post it on the discussion page. I'll try to find that information about commissions and stuff like that, and see if I can find readings. We will see how successful I am in finding readings about those things. But yeah, I'll try to get that information to you guys. And yeah, if you guys are interested, since we are going to have John, try to look him up. He's let me see if I can find his website real quick, just so you guys can sort of web stock him and come up with questions. And of course, I'm not finding it right now. Anyways, I'll see if I can find it, and I'll share it with you guys so you guys can, formulate questions that you might have specifically about his work for next week. Other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and enjoy this lovely weather that we're having, and do something fun. Right? All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I kind of wanted to bring this up earlier, but there's just too much happening. But it's kind of back on the like pricing work and doing large scale things, because I have somebody who wants me to paint their fence over the summer, but like do like a flower mural on it. And that's like, I've been wanting to do murals for a long time, but I've never had the opportunity. And so now I do, but I don't really know. She's like very adamant on like paying me for all the materials and then some, so that I have money for myself as well.
Mhm.
And like I'm compensated. But I have no like idea what price that would take, or like what materials I need for it to be like outdoor friendly and whatever. So I just wanted to know if you had any advice for
Okay.
that kind of project.
So it's like a wooden fence?
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to make sure that you're getting materials that will last
Yeah.
relatively long. So I would look for paint that is specifically used for outdoor use. So I'm thinking like house paint.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you want to create a mural, and you want to have colors to work with.
Yeah.
So decide on
buy like 20 gallons of different colors.
So
I don't know.
Get the size of the fence. Get the size of the fence, and then try to calculate. And there's no easy way to do this because it's going to depend on your design, right? Try to calculate how much paint in general you think you might need to cover the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And then subdivide that into sort of the small, quart size cans.
Okay.
So you can get different colors. But I would also, keep in mind, and within your design, just so the prices don't get completely astronomical.
Yeah.
In terms of material costs.
We did kind of talk about it before, and like what the fence is pretty big, and what she wanted is pretty detailed, and we kind of had to talk about like simplifying it a little bit, or like making it be in just the center of the fence, because it was like a lot. But I still am just like unsure.
If she's trying to cover the whole fence, like that's going to be a larger cost just from a material standpoint.
Yeah.
Not to mention from a labor standpoint. the amount of
Yeah.
hours you would be working on it. So again, I would be in dialogue with that person about that. See if you guys come to sort of a general understanding. I don't know your relationship with this person, but it's one of those things. So if you're trying to be like hella professional, right, you could come up with multiple plans, right? You could come up with your price point and your calculated cost for the original design that she wants, full fence, all the way, including materials and labor. So you could calculate that, give her a price. And this is actually kind of a negotiating tool right here, because if you calculate that and you give her that sort of like higher number, then when you give her the secondary design plan of, not necessarily covering the whole fence, but choosing a portion of the fence with a more simplified design and color palette, basically a limited number of colors that you would be using, plus, your calculated labor cost. If she sees the bigger number and she's like, whoa,
Yeah.
She's going to then look at your smaller number, and then that is going to seem more feasible.
Yeah. Okay, so then, like, if I figure out how much the materials are going to cost me, I still am unsure about, like what ratio do I ask for, like, just more money on top of that I know I'll be making back. Like, I know how much the materials cost, but then how much more should I ask for?
You should ask for however much money per hour that it's going to take, and then you should try to estimate how many hours it will take.
Okay.
That way you're giving, but don't say it's going to cost this number.
Well, yeah, but
you should say it will be approximately this number. I am estimating how much time it will take, but as with any creative project, the amount of time it creates to complete something cannot be calculated in finite.
Yeah.
So just sort of break down, like, as I say, like, I think since this is like your first mural, you can charge whatever you want per hour. I don't care. But I don't think it would be outside of the realm of feasibility to ask for $15 an hour.
Yeah.
No, it's not minimum wage because it is skilled labor.
Yeah.
But you're not like asking for like $30 an hour.
Yeah.
Which would be for a more experienced,
yeah,
mural artist who has done this time and time and time over.
Yeah.
So
we've been like talking about this for a long time. So by this point, I know that this isn't something I should do for free. But originally, I was like, if you just pay me for the materials, I don't need money after that. But now I know I need money. But like, that was my original thing, because I'm just scared of, like, I don't know. I've never done it before. So I feel like I don't deserve money out of it. I guess that's how I felt before. But I know different now.
You've painted before.
Yeah.
You have the ability to be a skilled painter.
Yeah.
You are simply shifting from painting on a canvas to painting on a fence side.
I think my perspective before was just like, since this was my first opportunity, I was just getting more out of the experience than I needed to be paid. But also college is expensive, so I need to be paid. Like, my time is expensive and whatever. But I don't want to overcharge, and I don't that's like give her the idea that something can happen and then halfway through we realize that there's not the money for it or whatever.
That's where I think you have to do the work up front, and you have to do the research. Give her the itemized the itemized calculated costs. Say like, okay, If you choose the full fence design plan with the amount of detail that, you know, we discussed, you know, that would require, you know, 14 different colors. I'm going to need this, you know, amount of black, this amount of this amount of that, and then itemize how much it would be for each color. And then put, you know, I calculate roughly that it will take me this amount of time or this amount of hours to complete the mural. Obviously weather dependent. And give the full cost, and do the same thing for the sort of, I don't want to say simplified, but we'll say streamlined, you know, design proposition. And maybe you shrink the amount of colors that are being used, and you use like a smaller color story. You know, I'm thinking of like the little color swatches from like Wes Anderson movies, you know, like they have a very specific color story. So maybe you just, you limit yourself to those amount of colors, and then that becomes like a design problem that you then have to solve creatively. You know, and you sort of say like, look, this is the one option, this is the other option, but just present it as professionally as you can. You know, I feel like you might have a general understanding of Photoshop. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Draw up your design, Photoshop it onto a picture of the fence.
I plan on doing that. I asked her today for a picture of the fence again, because I need to remember how big it was, so I can.
And you can even, you know, you can draw out like little lines that like show the dimensions of the fence, and let her know exactly how much square footage of fence she's trying to get you to cover. All of those sort of like visual tools and visual cues help her understand that you are professional and that you deserve to be paid for what you're doing.
Cool. Okay.
Because you do, and you should. I said because you do, and you should. But yeah, I know it's nerve-wracking when you do like your first project like that. But you know, as long as you present yourself in a professional manner, and you know that your work is worth something, other people will fall in line.
Okay, cool.
And like I said, you're giving her options, and if she sees the big number, she's probably going to think that little number is a lot a lot more doable.
I'll definitely give her options
and try to find. I'm going to look for contracts and stuff like that, but cool. you do your research on your own as well, because you should have it in writing. And if she wants changes made, remember, if people want changes made, you have to fee. There's a redesign fee. All right. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
I hope that helps. And have a great weekend, Jade.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.